What's up, world? I hope everybody's doing all right. I hope you guys like the hat. Welcome to another episode of the Psych Life podcast. And today we're going to be interviewing a friend that I met online through Instagram. His name is David Michael. And I'm sorry if I butchered that last name. David, how you doing today?
Doing well, Juan. How are you, man?
I'm doing pretty well, man. I was attracted to your page in the beginning. It was really unique. To be honest, I had never seen anyone doing some of the stuff that you're doing, which is pretty much fitness with a psychological component online. And I saw you do some of the workouts. I think I even participated in a couple of them. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what you do as an entrepreneur and as a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started a company called Cliff Hangar Academy. We are a clinically proven mental and physical training program that we train the brain, the body, and the breath as one to help people look, feel, and perform all day, every day at their best.
And that is so cool, man, because you're saying you're using clinically proven methods.
Yep.
So for the audience to get a better understanding, evidence-backed fitness models that you're using to help people on a physical and mental level. So do you mind, before we jump into the subjects, David, just to give you the platform a little bit, talk about some of the stuff that you do as far as that model that you're talking about, the fitness and mental component?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to make sure we're clear, so what we've done is we've actually created the psychology fitness industry. And there's a reason why it's psychology first. It's kind of the reason you and I got into conversations is that I'm a practicing psychologist, but I also have about 20 plus years in psychology, but also have 25 plus years in action sports and fitness. And so I figured out a way to combine the two with a psychology first approach. I've been measuring everything with hard data, testing, retesting, validity studies, reliability studies over and over again. So that when we develop what we call our Sci-Fi system, our PSY-FI system, that system now can be used in a step-by-step process by, we've put it across all different fitness modalities from rock climbing, snowboarding, surfing, Muay Thai, CrossFit, yoga. We're looking into spin, and then we also do HIIT classes as well.
I love that, man, because you're adding everything you mentioned there sounds so fun, man. Snowboarding, surfing, rock climbing, and it's not just the same old stuff. So I could really see that you're really adding a huge part. And I see why you put psychology first behind the psychology and fitness, man. And that's so cool. I need to do some of that with you, especially that snowboarding. I've never done that before.
We'll
But
get you up north here, Juan. We'll make it happen.
I appreciate that so much, man. So I'm really glad you're on this platform, man. And I'm really glad that you accepted this invite. I was looking forward to it. And today I'm going to bring up a lot of research topics. And I want to see your experience involving some of these topics because they're very important topics when we talk about these, David. And, this is an honor to have you here because this is the first time I have anybody that's not from so much purely the clinical side. There's also fitness component. So it's an honor to have you on this platform. So
thank you. An honor to be here.
I appreciate it, man. One recent study by the Harvard University, specifically T.H. Chan, he was the one who orchestrated this study, found that physical fitness, such as running for 15 minutes or walking for an hour, reduces the risk of major depression by 26%. So just to simplify it out here for our audience, not that you guys need any simplification out there, we talked about how depression is an array of symptoms, right? It's just a criteria of symptoms. And basically it's a diagnosis given when someone meets an array of symptoms, and it's a way for professionals to be able to communicate on a clinical level as to what's going on with that person. And this Harvard study showed right off the bat that just walking for an hour a day or physical fitness such as jogging or running for 15 minutes a day can reduce the symptoms of depression up to 26%. This is huge, David. This is huge developing. This is recent studies. They're still going off symptomatology, which means they're still looking at these diagnoses as symptoms. But I predict that within the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be more brain research showing as to why that is. And I just want to see what's your experience regarding this, because I know you work with clients hands-on, one-on-one, or in group levels in your fitness classes. I've seen it. I've been part of it. And what's been your observation regarding when people do engage in fitness? What do you see as far as their progressions in their way of being and their behaviors?
Yeah, great question, Juan. So I'm wondering if this is the same study that came up and they actually put a number on the steps. I'm not sure if this is the one that I read as well. I read this about maybe about a month ago. They said it's around like you got to go north of 8,000 steps a day, basically. Like, so they actually gave you like, hey, if you want to step your way out of depression, which I thought was a kind of a nice way to look at it, 8,000 plus steps is going to keep you there. And I wonder if that's the study or not. But if that's not, there is another study out there that was done by another prestigious university with a population size that was large enough to be statistically significant, that actually said that, yeah, I think it was like 7,000. The number that's coming around is over 7,400, but I think it's maybe a little bit more, and reduce the rates of depression. So that actually is something that we see in our program all the time. So I'm a psychologist, but I'm also I call it neuroscience nerd. I love neuroscience. I've been studying it for like over a decade now. And this is one of the things about our program is that it's, again, science, science, science. So one of the things that we see, and you know this from exercise yourself, like it's why we feel great after we work out in some way, shape, or form, is that you're actually activating certain neurotransmitters. And, you know, the two biggest ones we want to talk about typically when it comes to depression are dopamine and serotonin, right? You can boost the activation of those two neurotransmitters, and you're going to change your mood for the better, 100%. And so one of the cool things that we see in our program is that at the end of our 45 or 75 minute whatever kind of session the person is into, there is a significant, I mean, I can see it anecdotally speaking, and actually we're about to team up with Aura Ring and potentially Whoop, to see if we can start measuring a little bit more granularly. But I'm sure these people there's dopamine and serotonin levels are rising. One, I can see it in their face. Two, we can tell by the measurements, the pre-test, the testing we do previously to the session and the testing after the session, their own happiness rating scales. And then you can see it in someone's eyes, the way they talk, their affect, all these different things are happening. And I'd love to share one really cool story because I had a client of mine who was going through a really tough time. And she, we were working together. She got to like a great point. She kind of went on her own to go do her own thing after working weekly with me, and then kind of fell back into some of her, depressive episodes. And she actually got the medication she was seeing a psychiatrist, got the medication, had it in her medicine cabinet the whole time and said, listen, David, I don't want to take this medicine. Can we start working together again? Absolutely. As you know, now I'm not anti-medication. Medication has a place in people's treatment regimen for sure, but medication shouldn't be something that you're on for the rest of your life. I do not believe that should be a possibility for anyone. And the good news is, after working for another 6 weeks with this woman, we were able to get her episodic depression gone, and as well as she never touched the medication, even though she had it in her medicine cabinet the entire time.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because that's anecdotal evidence, and I love that, because although there's no actual research yet into what you're doing, you're trying to get that involved so you find out. And one of the things I tell all the time with anecdotal evidence, if the person, in this case the client, the individual, whatever term you want to use, is reporting that they're feeling better, then that is all the better. And when we talk about diagnosis as clinical terms, we're always talking about an array of symptoms, David. And that's why it's so cool that you're mentioning that, because the medication is just supposed to be used as a relief of the symptoms temporarily. Once that medication wears out, those symptoms are still there. And that's where lifestyle patterns must come into play and be adjusted. And that's what fitness does when we incorporate it into our lifestyle. The research just didn't stop there, though, David. It also said that in addition to relieving depression symptoms, the research also showed that maintaining regular exercise can prevent an individual from relapsing into this depression episodes that they're engaging in. So consistent exercise and adjustment in lifestyle patterns is essential. And you took the words out of my mouth, man, which was, I was not expecting that, but I can see that you're very knowledgeable, to be honest with you. And that's the increase in endorphin and serotonin levels, as well as dopamine levels. And those directly influence us in many other ways, such as focus and thinking abilities. And we're going to keep on going here for a second, because exercise can be viewed as a powerful depression fighter. And it can also help increase endorphins, like you mentioned. And the increase of endorphins is what you see when you're looking at your clients or individuals' faces that you're helping train and coach. And you see this almost this jubilant feeling in their face. And I've seen that in therapy when I'm engaging with them. And sometimes I view it more as building that therapeutic alliance with them. And let's say in the beginning, because I work with a lot of adolescent males, and we're shooting basketballs almost in the beginning stages of treatment, because I have to build that trust with them. And I do see that after we shoot for about 15, 20 minutes, or when we change that treatment setting and we're walking around, because I like to do different environments, I do see that they start opening up more as we change and we're engaging in those type of physical activities. So I really appreciate you sharing that, man. And that's some really cool stuff that you're doing. So we're going to go from.
Can I comment on that just for 1 second?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely, my friend.
So this is where and again, like so me, for our program is psychology, neuroscience, and action sports. And this is where neuroscience has always blown my mind, because I look at psychology as the why we do things, and I look at like why our brain does certain things, why we have certain behaviors, but I look at neuroscience as the how. Like this is actually how this stuff really happens. And the reason, and one of the reasons I picked the sports that I do, not only have I been doing these for a very long time, so I love them and I love sharing them with people, but also like these are more high risk sports. So you're going to have like a higher reaction from a neurotransmitter level, like higher levels of flow state induction and things like that. But what I love though, what happens with you, and I love the fact that you do this with your clients and shooting basketball with them, you're creating the bond with them while you're shooting. And the thing that's happening from the chemical level is that's oxytocin, man. Oxytocin's being released while they're doing this, and they're looking at you and they're like, yeah, I don't know why I like this guy, a little bit more now, as opposed to sitting in this kind of, conversational, therapeutic setting where you're on a couch and a chair and it's almost confrontational. But yeah, oxytocin is being released in your client's brain, and they're like, I'm going to bond with this guy automatically and they can't help it, which is kind of cool, because you're hacking the system in a way that's going to be more helpful for them and for you. This is where I love that synthesis of neuroscience and psychology coming together.
Just to touch on that, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Sometimes the work that I do in the field goes unnoticed, to others in the eyes, because everything's very confidential. It's not like I can post on Instagram like the work I'm doing, or I can tell clients to say, oh, take this picture with me over here, and we tell the world, what a great job we're doing. Like I can't do any of those things. And I appreciate those kind words. They actually meant a lot. And the field is changing, David, and what's happening right now in the field. And I have a mentor that I've never met. I know it sounds funny, but his name's Sadhguru. He's an online, but he's talking about how the field's always adjusting. And what happens is that you have these elders that they get promoted as they spend more and more time in the field to these high up positions with like directors and executives within the healthcare system. And they almost don't know how to adapt. They don't know how to adjust to the incoming of the field. And what's happening in the field now is the engagement in social media has changed the way people behave and perceive information and receive information, and the internet at large. And the older individuals in the field are having a tough time adjusting. So when you have like an older clinical professional who, just like you mentioned, wants to sit on the couch and talk, the kids aren't going to necessarily react. And that's because they're looking for something more. They're looking for a connection. So I really appreciate that statement. Yeah. And so let's keep moving on this list, because I have so much great research here that I took notes for, and I really mean it. So as you know, David, the American Psychological Association reports that about 40 million people are going to experience anxiety at some point in their life. Just so people get a perspective, that's about 20 to 25% of individuals here just in the United States alone. And so that means that throughout a lifespan, someone's going to experience the symptoms of anxiety at some point in their life. They're going to meet the symptoms. And just so everybody remembers, just in case they forgot our other podcast episodes, someone must meet the criteria for a minimum of at least 2 weeks. So we're not just throwing these terms out there, okay? And I'm going to add one more research. That's a big number there, David, when we talk about 25% of the U.S. population. But according to the U.S. Department of Health, that showed that physical activity can reduce causes of mortality by 30% for men and women. So not only can exercise reduce the symptoms of depression, and they can reduce the chances of you engaging in another episode of depression, but it can also help with your mortality rate. And just simply put, it can help you almost prevent the sympathetic nervous system, which is the survival aspect, to constantly be activated. So If someone's engaging in daily exercise, they've adjusted their lifestyle to incorporate exercise. All of a sudden, they find themselves less throughout the day, engaging in that survival instinct that they have. So what does that mean? That means that their limbic system, the emotional part of their brain, isn't being so activated, and they can think more clearly because they're not reacting so much on an emotional level. And I've had personal experience with this because I think about 2 years ago, I started working out in the mornings, and I found myself, more at peace with myself throughout the day. If something happened, I was able better to react. My brain didn't just respond in survival mode, David. And I just wanted to see what was your experience regarding this, because you're psychology first, but you're also very heavy in the fitness world, and you're helping others use fitness as a way to cope with what's going on in their life.
Yeah. So the way I like, the soundbite for this one is movement is medicine. We just, the stats that you've just talked about so far are proof of that. We can use movement as medicine. And there's been a lot of studies that I think, what was it? Harvard and Stanford collaborated on a study, and they found that, oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on this right now. We'll come back to that. But movement, for reducing depression, Stanford and I believe it was Stanford and Harvard did a combined study, and what they found is that for mild to moderate depression, rigorous exercise was just as effective as medication, like just as effective. And now that's insane. Now again, that's not talking about severe depression or like chronic depression, but you're talking about mild to moderate depression. If you exercise, and this is your 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week, it's just as effective as taking medication. And this is 100% what I believe my entire life. In my own personal story, exercise definitely saved my life. For me, I went through depressive episodes for about a year and a half, including suicidal tendencies. And movement was the thing that saved me. Like, it was the thing that really brought me back. It was the thing that, we talked about before, you're releasing all these chemicals, again, serotonin, dopamine, anandamide, oxytocin, adrenaline, cortisol, even in a good way, right? Endorphins. So you feel better. And then we have to think about this, and this is where I like to use a lot of my thoughts behind like an anthropological model. So if we look at, the current version of ourselves, Homo sapien, we've been around for probably 150 to 200,000 years. So you have a couple 100,000 years of evolutionary programming. Our ancestors were constantly moving, right? They were hunters and gatherers. We didn't get into the agricultural revolution until, about 10,000 years ago. So we'll take a baseline, 190,000 years of people moving. And so they're constantly moving. They're constantly getting these endorphins going, serotonin, dopamine. They're feeling good throughout their day. And that's what their day looks like. And now all of a sudden the agricultural revolution happens about 10,000 years ago. And now 2020, we are sitting in chairs way more than we've ever had. We are so sedentary. We're over 67% of Americans are overweight or obese. That's 2/3. That means if we added one more person to this conversation, 2 of us would be overweight. Now, you and I are both fit, so we have to find some other people. But this is one of the scary things. So you got to think about this from that anthropological viewpoint. Our ancestors have been moving for so long, and guess what? They weren't psychologists back then, but they knew something. They knew something was going on, and so because they were moving, they weren't so as a fight or flight driven. Even though they were literally being chased by freaking lions and stuff like that, they had to worry about dehydration and starvation to end their lives. But they're not being amygdala driven. Why? Because they are, I like to use the phrase, doped up with their own neurochemicals. Like, they feel good throughout the day, but they also have these high levels of focus and concentration on top of it. So movement is medicine, man. We got to keep moving. And this is one of the things, I talk about, is it Michelle? I think it's Michelle Seeger came up with this. She's a psychologist on the motivation of fitness, and she calls them OTMs, opportunities to move. And if you can look for more of those in your day, and this includes I got a TRX here now at my house because of what's going on with COVID, but banging some push-ups out, get up, go get a glass of water, hit some push-ups, do some squats, do a couple of crunches. Something to get you moving is going to create that physiological change. And when that physiological change happens, that switching from your sympathetic to your parasympathetic nervous system, you're going to go from, amygdala driven to hopefully more prefrontal cortex, or at least basal ganglia driven, where you're not so reactive. Like you said it yourself perfectly. When you work out in the mornings, you're just chiller throughout the rest of the day. Yeah, because you're giving yourself these awesome drugs that you have inside of you that make you feel amazing. So guess what? Not everything's a threat anymore. And it's also like you've realized that you're doing these harder things like lifting weights. So it's like, a little threat, someone saying something to you, all of a sudden it's not a big deal. Someone bumping into you, not a big deal. Like you're not being triggered by every little tiny thing that's thrown at you because your amygdala has gone offline. It got its medicine for the day, and it can chill out for a while.
And I appreciate that. And you're right. Our ancestors didn't have these titles that now we constructed in this 2020. And I appreciate you bringing out that stat about 67% of Americans are overweight. And if we're not knocking on the audience here or anything, but we're just mentioning how systemic issues do affect our health, and the way we live and the lifestyle that we develop does affect our health. And I appreciate some of those, David. And just to add, I didn't take notes about this, but you touched right there upon it at the end, and how exercise directly influences our self-esteem. And you didn't say that directly, but that's what you were saying, because when we exercise, we are doing it not only to feel good internally, as far as on a chemical and neural level, but we're also gaining external influence, because there is an unconscious hierarchy in society based on attraction, which include finances and physical appearance. And physical appearance tends to be measured symmetrically when it comes to psychology, but it's also measured through how the body looks. So once we start working out and we see progress in the mirror, which is not why I work out, or I'm sure David works out, but it's part of the human experience, because attraction and sexual tension are very real, then all of a sudden we start feeling better about ourselves, and we start gaining more confidence, not only with whatever sexual orientation you're attracted to, but also to the society at large. You start feeling better, and you start appearing more sexually attractive, and that'll just naturally give you not only another, almost like an injection of neurochemistry boost in the brain, but you will also just start feeling better about yourself. And I've seen that not only with myself when I go through periods of what I like to call bench fitness, right? Where all of a sudden, oh man, this week, you know what? Instead of working out the 5 times a week in the morning, let me throw in an extra 2 days. I won't take a day off as far as fitness. Let me throw in Saturday and Sunday. And all of a sudden, I'll start feeling a little bit more high up. It's tough to explain, but yeah, man, I look good, and just because I'm a therapist, that doesn't mean I don't have a human component in my personal life. You know what I mean? And that's so important for people to understand, that it's not just about the neurochemical balance that we get to feel good, but just to the outside world, there's an effect involved as well. And, I talk to this to people, David, and sometimes they want to avoid this component almost as if it doesn't exist. And it very much does exist. And social psychology has shown this through research time and time again. And I wanted to see if you've seen any experience on your end involving that or with your clients.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you get sometimes I get clients that come in, they're like, oh, I want to lose some weight. That's their main thing. Actually, it's funny. I have a client I'm working with right now. I spoke with him yesterday, and he goes, you know what, man? He's like, David, I came to work with you so I could lose some weight. And he's like, I really realized that 80% of what you do is psychology, and about 20% is actually fitness. And I was like, yeah, like that's what it is. But so again, looking at this from anthropological viewpoint, this is where you can't argue with this stuff because it's literally rooted in hundreds of thousands of years of research. If you're looking at someone and they're more physically fit, right? So we'll look at for a typical female looking at a male, or a male looking at a male. It shows them that they're more likely to carry or be able to carry offspring that are going to live generation to generation, right? They're looking for the best match so they can carry on their genes. That's what we're all looking for at a subconscious level. Like everyone's looking for this. That's why males are attracted to certain characteristics in females regarding chest size and hip size and things like that. Why females and males are attracted to certain males, and I guess the reverse is true. Females for females as well. But males, you're looking for, more muscle. Why? Because that's a defense. It looks like they can defend. It looks like they can physically defend. They can physically take care of not only the mate, the person that they want, but also their children, their offspring. So again, these are things that are ingrained in our brains from hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, where we don't think about it anymore, because we don't look at a male or a female and be like, whoa, they can probably carry some babies, or, oh, they can probably protect their offspring. You're not thinking about that. You're just like, wow, they're really attractive. But the reason why they're attractive too, you mentioned symmetry earlier, which is definitely one of those things for sure. It's a subconscious trait that we look for, is symmetry, is being symmetrical. But you're looking for someone who has these things that's going to keep your evolutionary, genes going to the next level. And of course, I definitely see this with my clients, and I tell them, a lot of the fitness that I do with my clients is it's called functional fitness, like fitness so they can actually participate in sports. Because that's why I work out. Like, I want to be able to compete at a high level in my sports. But I tell them, like, listen, if you do what I tell you to do, you're going to get the butt that you want. You're going to get the arms that you want. You're going to get the chest that you want. You're going to get some abs or some lines down there. That's going to come as well. But I'd rather have you do the functional fitness, because to me, functional fitness is also more important than just like, bodybuilding fitness, for example. Because it depends, like, if you, I guess, I don't want to go too far on this track, but we look at mobility, right? Mobility is the word. When you combine that word, it's strength plus flexibility together. And I think that's what we all really want, is that we want to be mobile. And mobile means, like, you have flexibility like a yogi, and you have strength like a bodybuilder together. Because a bodybuilder is great, but a bodybuilder can't touch their toes. So the flexibility, they have no flexibility, right? They can bench press the refrigerator, but they can't touch their toes or pick something up from the ground without squatting, right? And then a yogi is great because she can, he or she can grab their toes and bring their leg over their head, but you're not going to ask them to move furniture because they usually don't have that kind of strength. So you want someone who has that mobility to it too. And I think that's a really important thing for people to keep in mind for another level of, like, their fitness, I should say.
And that's why you mentioned earlier that you do a whole array of different types of fitness, and that's what your model includes. And I appreciate you sharing that for the audience, the functional fitness part, because I think that's important. And like you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned yogi because I talked about Sadhguru earlier, but I appreciate that as well, man. So
yeah, yoga's. I mean, I'm doing yoga tomorrow with one of my friends. She runs a studio in New York. I love it. It's great. You should.
And yoga, just so the audience knows, because sometimes yoga gets seen more as a fitness type thing, but really it's more of a way to harness your energies. And I appreciate that you do that in your model, David, for your clients. I do want to touch before I get on other stuff, and it's just more bullet points that I wrote down, but there is one more research that has shown, and this involves, it's very closely related to what we talked about earlier in considering anxiety, David, and it's ADHD. And the reason I bring this up is because boys are the research tends to fluctuate between 7 to 9 times more likely than females to be diagnosed with this, boys and girls. And when we say that, we're talking about at a young age. Boys tend to be 8 to 9 times more likely to be diagnosed. And there's been a lot of talk about this. Why is it? Well, is there a stigma behind it? Is what's going on? Why is the way where the criteria being used easier now to diagnose nowadays than it was back then? That's true as well. It's easier now to make diagnoses than it was back then. But also, if there's a stigma, to me, it's a little bit of everything. But I think a huge component involved now, David, and I'm sure by what some of the stuff you're telling me, I just want to hear your opinion on it, is that boys nowadays, school is catered now at even a young age, because I've walked into schools, to provide therapy. I'm seeing them, it's so much more structured than it was back then. And now you incorporate what you said earlier, that everyone is less inclined to do exercise, and parents are less inclined to take their kids to the park. Everything's indoors, everything's done inside. And so this built up energy that happens, that needs to be let out almost, is kept inside, and then it's displayed in the classroom. Because what happens when boys see other boys and other peers? They get jubilant, they get excited, they don't know how to handle this type of emotion, and they start engaging in these type of behaviors that are not controlled according to the teacher. They get sent to the school psychologist, they get diagnosed at ADHD, when really, to be honest, they may meet the symptoms, but when you look at everything going on and all the components I just mentioned, they're just being boys. And that's where and that's where I feel like the field sometimes, they really miss the mark, because they start focusing so much on the literature and these symptoms that they really miss the mark as to the context as to what's going on. And I'm sure I just want to see what you have to say, because on this platform, David, we've interviewed shamans to empathic healers to public figures, and now psychiatrists, all types of healers. And I consider you a healer as well, because fitness is a type of healing and coping strategy. And you have the psychological component, of course. But I just want to see what was your take on that, because to me, that's a very important topic. And from an early on, kids are already being labeled, especially young boys, because they want to engage in this physical activity. It's a need for them. And I don't think people realize that.
Yeah, and there's so much to unpack there. You know, you get into labeling theory, you get into primary and secondary deviance. Like, you can go off on that kind of stuff. Again, I'm going to suck this back anthropologically, because like, this is what I'm saying, you can't argue with at least tens of thousands of years of this stuff, if not 100,000 of years. You know, our ancestors were moving 12 to 16 hours a day, 12 to 16 hours a day for hundreds of thousands of years. And now all of a sudden we're like, oh, if you move 30 minutes a day, you should be good. Now I'm not a statistician, but like, that's like a 90-something% decrease in movement. So you still have this ability, you still have this want, this need, this desire to be moving, particularly, you know, when you're younger, particularly in males who are more drawn to, you know, riskier behavior. They're more, this is, you know, why males are more drawn to contact sports, why they have higher suicide rates, like more likely for drug and alcohol addiction. Like, males are more drawn to like risky behavior. So now you're telling this kid who has all this energy, who just wants to play, and who's been literally evolved to be a moving person, and you're like, you need to sit down for like 4 hours at a time, and you need to not move. I mean, maybe not even 4 hours, which also then so now this goes against the way our brains are actually developed when you talk about working in ultradian rhythms. And so I know a lot of people are familiar with circadian rhythms of how our sleep cycle is dedicated to the sun, but an ultradian rhythm is how your brain can work and concentrate and focus up and down, up and down. So I can't remember who came up with the concept for ultradian rhythms, but this is that your brain can only keep a focus for a certain amount of time, and you're only given certain hours. Who's the guy that did deep work? Is the guy I'm trying to think of. He's the guy who, yeah, if you want to look that up, the guy who wrote Deep Work did it. He's the guy who came up with ultradian rhythms. Your brain works in these rhythms, right? Just like everything else in life, it's a rhythm. It's an up, it's a down. And so your brain can only concentrate for up to about an hour and a half max, like super intense focus. Then you have a precipitous drop off after an hour and a half. So what they've figured out is you can work in these like 3 different cycles depending on what your attention span is. So you can work in a 25-5, a 50-10, or a 75-15. So you work for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. You can work for 50 minutes, take a 10-minute break, or work for 75 minutes, take a 15-minute break. That allows your brain to kind of reset its focus and then come back. This is why, like, you know, this is almost going back to memory. You look at primacy and recency effect, right? You're going to more likely to remember the first thing and the last thing. Well, if you keep resetting that, first thing, last thing, first thing, last thing, first thing, last thing, you're going to remember a lot more if you keep giving yourself little breaks just based on that ultradian rhythms by themselves, or coupling that with primacy and recency effect. So again, you're having these poor kids sit in classrooms for hours and hours at a time, going against how their bodies are wired, going against how their brains are wired, and then you don't give them the proper outlets, and then they may not even have the proper outlets at home either. And this is why you have a lot more behavioral problems for children, or like you said, that they're acting out according to therapists or even their parents, but they forget you're like, hey, it's a 9-year-old boy. This, like, you know, 10,000 years ago, this kid was out like running around the forest for 12, 16 hours a day. And now we're telling it to sit in a friggin', you know, 1-by-1 chair and pay attention to something that they're probably not even interested in. And this is why I think there's a program they started in Switzerland and now they're all over the world. And I can't remember what the name of it is, but do you know where I'm going with this?
Is it the one, and I'm sorry for this, but is it the one that they incorporate nature as the environment where they're going to learn? Is that the one? Or because I know now there's new programs, but these programs, they're being shown to work better than the standardized educational system that's being, you know, around the westernized culture. Is that the one?
Yeah, they just celebrated, they just celebrated like one of their big anniversaries, right? Because my girlfriend's, one of my girlfriend's best friends back in Malaysia have her 2 kids go to one of these schools. And the kids don't learn like math and math and alphabet and writing and all this kind of stuff until like they're in like the second or third grade. They're literally just working. They're like outside. They're learning like social skills. They're learning how to build stuff. They're learning proprioception, which is your body's awareness in space. They're allowing the kids to climb trees and stuff, you know, like all this crazy stuff. And what they're finding is that these kids are better socially adjusted. They have less likely of experiencing any kind of mental disorder, even anxiety, like even episodic anxiety, for example, depression, things like that. They're way healthier than their cohorts who are going to your traditional Western schools, which is built on the 1940s German, actually 1930s German model is where we stole our schooling from. And I mean, that was, again, I don't want to go too far on this, but like, our current school model was built on the Industrial Revolution when we needed more factory workers who were smart enough to run the machines, but not smart enough to question the authority of who was telling them what to do. And you still kept those school system in place, and we're wondering why we're having all these problems. Now, again, that's not the only problem, but there's like, you can't expect an antiquated system to work in a technologically advanced world, just like you can't expect people who've been evolving for hundreds of thousands of years to be moving animals to then now sit down for 8 hours a day.
And man, you really touched on a lot of good points there. And to break each one down, and it's kind of like the same thing you told me. It's kind of the same thing you told me. It would take a long time, but you touched on good points. And and just to add to some of the points that you made there regarding that specific school, and I'm so sorry to the audience out there for not having the name. We're gonna find that out for you. I'll post it maybe in the description section of the YouTube video. They also are reporting that they're able to communicate better their feelings, and they're able to also be more socially aware and adjust and creative. So this model is something that the Japanese have started to implement within their school system, because they're not teaching any actual subjects until probably the second grade, if I'm not mistaken, and they're starting to adapt to this model because of the great research that's being shown from them. And this all ties back, just so everybody remembers, to the ADHD conversation on how boys are being diagnosed more. And and we talked about some of the components, but the need to be moving, like David mentioned, the need to be keeping on the go, the need to incorporate almost a physical aspect into education is so necessary. And research keeps showing this time and time again, but the system does not adapt. And I think, David, that's a good topic to incorporate in our next podcast, man, because I'd love to have you as a guest again. But there is a couple more topics here in relation to this that I want to talk about, man. And I guess we can close it off here just for everybody, because it is nighttime over here. And David and I are in the Eastern time zone. David's in New York. I'm in Miami. And it's sleep and how exercise. And you mentioned circadian rhythm. And that's why we're on the same wavelength, bro, because you mentioned circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm's a funny thing, because we're not nocturnal like owls. It's been shown that performance in fitness is actually best in the afternoon or early part of the evening. And when we exercise in the morning, and this is very detailed, whatever we consume for the rest of the day doesn't get stored within our body. It gets used as energy. Mm-hmm. And when we work out, our circadian rhythm gets activated, which in turn at nighttime leads to a better rest and REM sleep cycle for us to experience. And just so everybody's aware, you can sleep 10 hours, but if you're not engaging in the proper REM sleep cycle, you're going to be tired. And so that's why exercise is so important. And we've talked about this in a previous podcast, David. We had a psychiatrist in talking, and he went deep into this. But I know that have you had any experience with this regarding sleep and the components involved in exercise and the circadian rhythm and all that good stuff that you were mentioning earlier?
Oh, hell yeah, Juan. So now you're hitting a topic for me that I can talk about all day and night. So sleep is my number one self-care habit. Number one, like everything else falls under sleep. Why? Because I've noticed that if I don't have my proper sleep, everything else that I do doesn't matter. I'm not performing at a high level. You know, I've had a lot of clients who've dealt with insomnia. I personally dealt with insomnia on and off for a few years. So I've read every book, all the research papers, workshops, you name it. Like, I'm obsessed with when it comes to sleep for many reasons. One, and this is the biggest thing I want everyone to realize, we're always talking about like, you know, all of us want to get better and we want to do it in an efficient way, right? And we want to do it in a way that's fun. That's the basis of our program. Like what we do is effective, it's efficient, and it's friggin' fun. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. Sleep is all of that stuff. Sleep is the most effective way for you to build muscle. It's the most effective way for you to consolidate memory so you can actually be smarter and have better recall. You know, it's the best way for you to reduce inflammation, which 100% every single disease, actually, no, I'm sorry, 95% of the disease that people are admitted to hospitals with are due to inflammatory response by the body. COVID is an exact thing. That's why they're like, if you exercise, you're less likely to either have catch COVID or be affected by the really bad symptoms because your body's not inflamed from it. So yeah, sleep is huge. You got to be doing it. Exercise is intimately tied to sleep, and this goes, you know, a lot of different things. We talk about melatonin, like, so exercise is a few things from a neuroscience, a neurochemical point of view. One, it helps the production of melatonin. So the more that you exercise, you're kind of wearing yourself out. The more your melatonin builds up. When your melatonin builds to a certain threshold, that's when it tells your brain like, hey, let's go to bed. You're really tired. And typically, like you said, we're not nocturnal animals, so that happens later at night. The other thing that it does, it affects adenosine. And so adenosine is the sleep neurochemical. So that's when we drink coffee, coffee doesn't actually, the stimulant in caffeine, yes, it does, it wakes you up. But what it does is it really inhibits adenosine receptors. And so when you do that, you're shutting those adenosine receptors off and you're telling yourself you're not tired by drinking coffee. But when you're exercising, your adenosine receptors are more likely to fire. So you're actually gonna be able to sleep better at night, and you're gonna be able to fall asleep faster and not get up, which is what you're talking about, Juan, is that disturbing those REM cycles. Because so average American, 95 to 98% of the population are regular sleepers. So regular sleeper means you need 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep. Only about 2 to 3% are short sleepers. And it's very, very rare where you need 6 to 7.5 hours of sleep to be like fully on. So once you identify like how much sleep you need to be getting the last REM cycle. And that's the one that most of us don't get. So if most of us need, let's just say I'm in the upper level, I'm an 8.5, 9 hour guy. Say someone needs 8 hours of sleep and they get 7 hours of sleep every night. And they're like, no, I feel pretty good. Like, 7 hours is pretty good. It's I'm in that range. Like, one, no, you're not. But the other problem is that you're not getting the final REM cycle. And the final REM cycle is when your body actually detoxifies itself. So a lot of stuff happens. The brain, literally, it's like a cleaning crew goes through your brain and gets rid of all the brain gunk that you have. Yeah, your brain and your body, it's the last REM cycle that you hit is when you consolidate the most memories. So literally you're helping your focus, you're helping your concentration, you're helping your ability to learn. And then from a body standpoint and brain standpoint, you're literally cleaning out all the gunk and junk that you have in your brain and your body, all the inflammatory things that you've picked up from that day, all the stressors in that last REM cycle. So this is why I harp on people. I'm like, figure out what your number is. And that takes a little bit of study to do, but also figure out what your chronotype is. This is another big thing that people aren't familiar with chronotypes. So chronotypes is when your body and brain are the most active. And there's 4 different chronotypes. So you have lions, who are your super early morning people, your 4 or 5, 6 a.m. wake uppers. You have your bears, which is most of the population. Those people that wake up around 7 or 8, they usually have 9 to 5 jobs. And then you have your wolves. I'm a wolf. Wolf is a nighttime person. Like I go to bed 12, 1 o'clock in the morning every night, and I don't wake up until usually around 8 or 9, depending on what I have going on the next day. And then you have the 4th chronotype, which is kind of the worst chronotype, is dolphins. And dolphins are actually insomniacs. So these are the people that can only sleep for 2-3 hours at a time. A lot of people throughout history have actually talked about that. And one thing I will disprove this too, because this has been disproven. Because I know people like Churchill was one of them. There was some others, really famous person, where they only slept in 2 to 3 hour increments, and they kept they're like, oh, I'm so much more productive. It's BS. They're short sleepers. They're 2-3% of the population. That does not work for most of us. So if you're listening to this and you think you can get away with sleeping for 2 or 3 hours, then getting up and then sleeping for 2-3 hours again, and later down the line, stop doing that. You're literally killing yourself. And it's been proven clinically that you can shave 7 to 10 years off your life from improper sleep habits. So if you don't mind dying 10 years younger, keep messing with your sleep.
You're telling me that Churchill was, his life got cut short and he was always pissed off Uh,
I mean, he
no,
also,
it wasn't his natural mood. It was because he was lacking sleep.
I mean, well, let's see. Churchill, yeah, he was definitely, he was a dolphin from what the history has said. I mean, the guy was obese on top of it. He had a drinking problem. So I mean, you got like amazing military leader, nothing taking away from Churchill. Like he did some incredible things in his time. He was a very enigmatic man though, and that guy was an enigma in many, many ways because he was able to accomplish what he accomplished despite an alcohol problem, despite being obese, despite being an insomniac. So don't do those things. Like that's
And
not a good
smoking
role model for your
cigars.
health. Yeah,
And
it's a good
smoking
role.
cigars.
And and smoking cigars. Yeah, so not a great role model for military leadership and for presidential or prime minister leadership. Not a great role model for your health and wellness, though.
Man, that's so funny, man. And you brought up a lot of great points, bro. I'm so glad I have you on this podcast, man. And I really appreciate you coming on because to me, you're a healer. And with the fitness aspect involved, and you're the first one I've ever interviewed like that. You brought up that chart on lions, bears, dolphin, and wolves, and that's actually research that's been ongoing. It's new research for everybody out there. So if you're studying in the psych field, it's not something that's going to be in your textbooks, all right? And that's coming from two psych majors here. And I got my master's in psychology. I'm a therapist and everything. It's not something that's going to be in the textbooks. But what David was talking about is very real. And it's almost just like any other theory. They're classifying individuals, but this one's based on research. And David, you mentioned, I think, that you're a wolf. And just so everybody understands, a wolf is more of a night animal. And from what I remember on that chart, because this is all from memory, David, wolves tend to go to sleep at 12 and they tend to wake up in the well, it's still pretty early. I mean, 8:30, and they like to get their day going. They like to get their day started slow, and they start getting their work done in the later part of the afternoon. And I'm actually a lion, man. I have to, if I don't wake up, yeah, man. By the time you're starting to get going working, that's the time I'm shutting off my engines. Like right now, yeah, right now it's so funny because right now I'm pushing myself because I love doing this. But really, like this is the time I like to shut off my engines. But I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I have this thing, and I understand it's something in my psyche that I fight. Like people are starting first than me. You know, people are starting first than me. They're getting that head start, and it's almost like when I wake up, it's like this is my dream. This is what I gotta do. I gotta, and that's how I roll. You know, but man, it's so funny, man. I really have enjoyed having you on, David, and just so everybody understands, when we talk about sleep, exercise, and the message David was getting across is exercise is so crucial for that REM sleep cycle. And I'm sure exercise, I think like you mentioned, David, helped you out with what you were facing because you were going to workshops and stuff with insomnia. And I'm sure it had a huge impact on your life. And one of the things that can never be measured in this life is how much of an impact something can have on us when we engage in it every day. And God, only the universe itself knows the impact fitness can have on us. There can be so much research out there and we could present them all to you, but you got to experience it yourself out there, guys. And David, I just want to see if you have any last word for the audience. Personally, I've had so much respect for you, man. I really enjoy what you're doing. You're an entrepreneur to what you're doing because, like I mentioned, you're the first one that I saw, and I've been on Instagram for 4 years and on all these other social media platforms, but you're the first one that's kind of doing what you're doing. It's unique, to use the word. And I just want to see if you have any words for the audience, because to me, man, we've had many healers and you are a healer in my book.
Well, thank you, Juan. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be on. You know, I love having conversations with other psychologists, people who are really passionate, you know, about the why. Like I'm completely obsessed with our, not only our why, but our how. Like why our brains do the things that we do, why things we do, and how we do them. Just one quick thing on fitness, just to close that out too. For anyone who's working out, Juan made the distinction that yes, it's really good in the morning and it's really good in the afternoon, early evening. Do not work out though too close to your bedtime. Approximately, you want to give yourself at least a 2-hour window. Approximately 3 hours is even better, because otherwise you're going to actually start messing with your sleep. Your body temperature rises too much, and you're going to have trouble either falling asleep or staying asleep. But the things that I'd love to just remind people are as one, movement is medicine. If you guys want to feel better, if you want to look better, if you want to perform better in any aspect of your life, you got to have some kind of physical fitness routine involved in it. And remember, we talk about these OTMs, opportunities to move. It doesn't have to be a full-blown gut-busting 60-minute CrossFit workout. So yeah, I want you guys to make sure that you guys are taking those those opportunities to move throughout your day. The other thing I want you to think about too, and this is what our sci-fi system is based on for psychology fitness, is we call it our 4P principle. So it's problem, physiology, psychology, perspective. Whenever you get stuck on something, whenever maybe you're ruminating about something, maybe you're in a downward spiral with your thoughts, maybe you're just trying to bang out a paper or a report, or just something that you get stuck with, no matter what it is, I want you to try these 4Ps and let me and Juan know how it works out, because this is what we've been scientifically, clinically validating, for years now. You want to identify the problem. So what's the problem? So we'll say, okay, I'm ruminating about the fact that I lost a bunch of business because of COVID, and I can't let go of the thought's just going over and over again in my head. Okay, cool. Then I have the problem. Next, you got to activate your physiology, do some movement. Now, this is where the movement has to be a little bit more vigorous, but I want to say, like, anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, even longer, up to 20, 30 minutes. Like, we teach a class. I'd like to invite all of your listeners to our class on Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. where I'll teach you all this stuff, but you got to activate your physiology, get moving, get those neurochemicals stirred up. Because of that, because of the physiological change from the inside out, literally at a cellular level, your perspective, your psychology has to change. That's the third P. And with that new psychological mindset, your perspective now goes to be this wide. And so now you can see things that weren't there. You can see solutions that weren't there. You can have a better time at letting go of that thing you're holding on to and ruminating. You can have a better time maybe accepting it for what it is. Maybe it doesn't look as big. Now, these are the 4 Ps that we teach at Cliff Hangar Academy. And like I said, we've clinically validated this. So I want to share this all with you. And I'd love to come on another time and talk about this with you and your audience, Juan. But yeah, Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time, we teach these classes. You can check us out at Cliff Hangar Academy anywhere on social. Juan and I are tied on Instagram, cliffhangaracademy.com. But yeah, our goal is to help 1 million people through this program. And, I'm passionate about psychology and fitness, just like Juan is. That's why we got connected like this. And so I want to be able to bring those 4 Ps out to more people, try them, and watch how easy it can be to flip that psychology around just through some movement, which we already talked about is amazing for your body in so many other ways anyways.
Well, thanks so much, David, man. Cliffhanger.com. You heard it, guys. The 4 Ps. They're trying to reach 1 million people that they want to help out. And if you guys want more information on Cliffhanger, just check out the description in our YouTube video. Or if you're on Spotify, check out at Cliffhanger on Instagram, or you can go to my following on Instagram and you can find Cliffhanger right there, or in cliffhanger.com. Actually, you could go directly there and
Cliffhanger Academy.
Cliffhanger Academy.com, right?
Yeah, .com, Cliffhanger Academy, all on social. We're the only one out there.
And I appreciate you so much, man. David, this has been an honor, and we're definitely gonna have you back. And to the audience out there, thank you for listening. I hope that you guys learned something new today, and check out David over here at cliffhangeracademy.com, man. And David, I appreciate you, all right, man? And I hope you have a safe day, a good night's sleep, actually. Engage in the full REM sleep cycle, all right?
Yeah, of course. There you go. You too, Juan.
See ya, man.